Good morning. Thanks so much for tuning in to the trade setup. I'm Neeraj Shah, and um, well, it's the Friday, and it'll be interesting to see how the markets react in the second half to what has been arguably an evening yesterday of hawkish central bank commentary. So volatility hit the U.S. stocks with hawkish Fed speak, and the ECB went big with jumbo rate hike, and Lagarde hinted at more hikes to come, 75 basis point and more hikes to come. I got a message from a veteran bond market expert that the last time he had heard the ECB was this hawkish was when he was in school. It just shows the extent of hawkishness at the global central banks. The good part for India is that oil prices are remaining near the 8-month lows on demand concerns. Another piece that stood out yesterday post-market hours was the statements from the government that the Indian and Chinese troops in the Gogra hot springs region have begun to disengage. Well, we e- e- every bit of every piece of news that leads to lesser concerns on geopolitics is always welcome. Some agri updates, by the way, because there are a few of them. Wheat has tumbled as markets eye uncertain demand and Ukraine sales. In addition to, by the way, Australia saying that they will have a fairly strong harvest this season as well. So that's probably good news from a global inflation perspective. What's bad news from a global inflation perspective is that India has curbed rice exports in a blow to those inflation expectations. Now, keep in mind, I think every country will have to do this in order to ensure that the supplies are secured for its own people, and therefore India has been no different out there. Indian cotton production is seen higher on good rainfall as per the USDA FAS. This is the cultural attach, and that should also augur well. Let's wait and watch how. I mean, do markets necessarily react? Maybe they react on rice stocks moves, but otherwise, don't know. Okay, now to the markets. US markets in yesterday's session, about 0.5% or slightly above that, but very volatile. That's the key point that happened. The other indicators have stable. I mean, yields have probably moved up a little bit. Yeah, 3.31 from 3.26 yesterday. The dollar index has actually come off mild bit, but 109.14. Bitcoin around that level. And the SGX Nifty will come up on your screen next. Mild uptick, I think, from, if I'm not wrong, but let's bring it up. Yes, about 87 odd points, 0.5% uptick seen in the SGX Nifty as well. Well, the thing is, despite all the concerns, the Nifty is building up, and there are breakout zones happening, which is what is prompting a lot of traders to believe that the markets may continue to move higher. Now, look at this. While we are all thinking of what the index could do and the Nifty could do, it's the bank Nifty where the action has been center stage, if you will, consistently outperforming Nifty over the periods of 1 week and 1 month. And that's quite stunning, really, what banks are doing per se. And remember, viewers, despite all of these moves in the last 1 month, on a relative basis, or actually on an absolute basis too, on a valuation front, a bunch of banks have room to go. Everybody, I repeat, everybody is bullish on banks. Fundamentally, from an earnings perspective for FY23, which is not to say that people are bullish that banks will come out with earnings 3 years down the line. The earnings are expected to be strong this year, and which is why I think the bank Nifty rally, you never know. I mean, dips will get bought into, if you will, unless there is a catastrophe around the world. But bank Nifty is probably the strongest out there. I think the Nifty can inch higher, which is capitalizing on Thursday's rally if global markets stay benign. For now, they look benign, and therefore we will probably see the start and maybe a continuation of this, unless the European markets buckle when they come out. And the both bank Nifty and Nifty IT, if indeed the Nifty were to move up, would be participating in the next leg of an up move. So that is something to be watched out for. Institutional flows continue. Foreign investors bought about 2,900 crores. DI sold about 212 crores. Now, just before we get to stocks to watch, there are thoughts around, right, that what could happen to some of the large banks. There's a question on HDFC twins in light of the merger. I think that the thing to ponder about. I mean, there is this merger angle to HDFC notwithstanding. As Pramod Gubbi of Marcellus was making this point yesterday, what's happened in this recent move on the banks is that the ICICI banks, SBI, some of the others have gotten re-rated, but the Kotak banks, HDFC banks, etc., haven't really, to an extent, actually, you are argue maybe gotten derated a bit on a relative basis. They haven't really moved up, and therefore, when the earnings growth comes in, when the NPA recognition cycle shows very little evidence of any issues with these banks, you might actually start seeing these banks to perform. So look at the HDFC twins in light of the merger together, or look at them individually because there's a ratio around which they'll move. If HDFC Bank were to move up, HDFC would, and vice versa. According to a lot of people, they are very favorably placed. But let's wait and watch. For stocks to watch in the session today, it's just a closure of deal, but I thought it is important to highlight Titagarh Wagon simply because everybody's watching out for the railway beneficiaries of late. The Railtels, Titagarhs, Texmacos of the world. Titagarh has individual news, wherein the Italian subsidiary has finally gotten the fund infusion of that 14.5 million euros from the two entities for 44% stake. So the transaction is consummated. Maybe the stock has a reaction. Maybe rice stocks have a reaction because India has imposed that 20% export duty on rice exports. Maybe there's a negative reaction to some of those. Who knows? PNZ Infratech, it's won an NHAI project bid of about 1458 crores. This could have a positive move. It's a stock. It's a company that's got a fairly decent order book, by the way, but this may well bring about a bit of a reaction. Vodafone, now this was widely reported in the papers yesterday, but officially PTI is now saying that the government will acquire a stake in Vodafone Idea after the stock price of the company stabilizes at 10 rupees or above. Will it do, is the question. Significant position building ahead of any kind of news that had come out on Vodafone in the last 2 or 3 sessions. Could there be supply? There could well be, so be mindful of that in Vodafone. I per se don't think this is a stock moving development in the truest of sense. I mean, yes, it could move about a little bit and it's got a lot of problems. What worries me, viewers, is that the last few days, the kind of stock recommendations that are moving around within circles is a Vodafone. Not bad companies. I'm just saying they are low price stocks, penny stocks, the likes of Dish TV, Vodafone Idea, etc., etc., etc. So be careful of that. Samvardhana Motherson, they're going to acquire the assets from Daimler India in Chennai at book value. In return, they have signed a long-term agreement with Daimler India for supply of the complete frame assembly. Could this be big? Maybe still details awaited, to be honest, but let's wait and watch. MK Alternative Research has done some fairly interesting analysis on FI flows on the last fortnight. So they have, on the basis of that, 2 interesting sectors. One, healthcare. It's seen the largest inflow of 1,018 million. Maybe the block deal in Max Healthcare would have caused this flow, but still, net, it's the largest inflow. And the FI stance versus MSCI index turned from underweight to overweight. The key is, viewers, I think it's important to figure out if indeed this continues for healthcare or whether it was largely due to Max. But FI flows positive for the healthcare space. For financials, an inflow of $838 million. FIs are overweight in the sector versus the MSCI index by 700 basis points. This overweight stance came down a little bit, but still overweight, 714 basis points. And that's an interesting piece of data as well, to my mind. So do watch out for that as well. What else in terms of stocks? Well, Systematics has come out with a note on cement. They are saying that the recent channel checks suggest that 15 cities indicate that all India cement prices fell. But more importantly, the last 2 lines, viewers, that there is relatively better demand in August versus June and July due to a drop in steel prices for construction projects by and large, and maybe for cement. And industry participants expect sharp uptick in prices in the run-up to the festive season or in October. Maybe that's why cement stocks have been doing what they are doing. Mahindra & Mahindra unveiled the XUV 400 EV. Nomura as note suggests, they are saying that M&M has raised the EV bar. They maintain the view that in the current taxation regime, large SUV segment is in a sweet spot to launch EVs due to this wide GST differential, right? People will say that if I want to buy an SUV, let me buy an EV SUV instead of an ICE SUV because of the GST numbers. And therefore, maybe the electric SUVs get snapped up much quicker. They are saying EVs will turn out to be more attractive than hybrids in India. That's Nomura view. RC Bhargav thinks otherwise. And they're saying that M&M's strategy of becoming a lifestyle SUV maker has potential to keep driving the re-rating. As Gautam Dugar of Motilal Oswal had said the other day in an interview, despite this sharp run-up in M&M, it's still trading at 15, 16 times. It's not exorbitantly expensive. That's an important point. So watch out for Mahindra and Mahindra as well. What else? Have I missed out on anything? Let me just quickly check before I tell you what stood out for me. Yeah, there is Indian yields have been interesting. They've come off, and maybe 7.1 could be positive for banks. Let's wait and watch. Trying to understand if there is something else that should be watched out for. Zomato brokerages are very positive. Morgan Stanley has an overweight call, a target of 80. Credit Suisse has an outperform call, target of 90. So do watch out for that. JP Morgan has come out with a note on Godrej Consumer. Target has been raised to 1,000. Watch out for that one. And yeah, this is about it. What I see Securities upgraded ZF CV to about 12,160. So maybe that stock has some positivity. So watch out for that as well. Lastly, viewers, what stood out for me is something that is widely reported by brokerages, but now Bloomberg is reporting that Morgan Stanley and Goldman are expecting an announcement on India's inclusion in the global bond index very soon this year. Morgan Stanley expects apparently by mid-September. And Russia's exclusion may pave the way for India into the global bonds index. They expect 10% weightage, which is fine, $30 billion of inflow, which is great, again reported. The key line for me is that more than 60% of real money investors are ready or almost ready for India's inclusion, which is as per a Morgan Stanley survey. This, when it happens, as most of you would be knowing, would be fairly positive from bond market perspective, yes, because there's so much of bond issuance that Indian states and center is doing. I'm guessing these would be central bonds that they come into. But more importantly, viewers, it's also great for the currency, right? So watch out. This is the makings of being a big positive. There are too many false starts in the last few years. Maybe this time around it could be for real. So watch out for that. Have a great weekend, everybody. Ganpati Bappa Moria. If you are in Mumbai or any of the Maharashtrian regions, which will see traffic log jams, maybe, though I think the state police and the district police forces are very adept at making sure that things go fine. But yeah, be mindful of that. But more importantly, viewers, it happens once in a year. Try and go out and enjoy this moment, even if you're out. It's a spectacle that is very different and unlike any other that might happen. So it's a beautiful day, the Visarjan. Maybe look at the positive side of it. I certainly do. Ganpati Bappa Moria. Have a great weekend.